Welcome back to our latest episode of Gaming on the Block. Today with me, I've got Mona and Annie as always. Of course, a special thank you to our sponsor, Eat Lizards. And also, a fun little thing that we're going to have this episode as well. We're going to have a really special guest who's going to pop in about halfway through. But without wasting any time, let's jump into the first topic, the Yuga Labs pass, the mini game that they've done. Mona, I'll throw it to you there. Do you want to do a bit of an intro? Get us all up to date on what happened there.
What happened was Jimmy was partying with Curtis, okay? Then Jimmy somehow ate the key to the universe, okay? And then the key got stuck in his butt. I'm not kidding.
True story.
Okay.
She's not lying.
His face was freaking hilarious. Okay, so then the key got stuck in his butt, okay? And then y'all have to go down the sewer hole in his intestines. And while you're down there, you got to collect as many fragments as you possibly can. That's the game.
Okay.
You got it?
How does this relate to Web3 gaming? It kind of does and kind of doesn't. So the question that we've got is Yuga Labs, which obviously is I would say the largest player in the space. Whenever they release content, there's a lot of speculation. Obviously, I think everyone knows Macy and their groups. The floor price is the highest of any of the large NFT collections. As always, have been able to capitalize on that hype. We know they're in the process of trying to build out a massive online game with Otherside, but they created a mini game to, I would say, keep their community engaged. And what they did, exactly as Mona said, they've got this backstory, and it's a very simple, like Temple Run type of game where your character is just moving forward. We'll see if we can get some footage up for you all as I'm just describing it. But you got to collect the different key fragments as you're going through. Each of the players has the chance to actually play the mini game, even if you don't have a pass. But if you want to actually be competitive, you have to own one of their sewer passes. So they basically airdrop the sewer pass to each of their holders and other NFTs in their ecosystem. And what they're doing is combining a skill-based gamification where you have to be able to get certain scores in this game. And based on the score that you get, your overall positioning relative to everyone else, you're going to combine that with the tier of the sewer pass that you have. And at the end, they're going to reward you with some specific undetermined, undescribed giveaway. Now, we do know whoever has the highest score globally is going to get the key that Mona described. So you'll have the key to the universe. No telling what that unlocks, but congratulations. For everyone else, there will be some additional form of value. So, what I want to ask you guys, based on your experience, I mean, this has obviously worked, I think, pretty well for the Yuga Labs holders. What do you think about this concept of applying like mini games to your NFT to be able to improve it, or basically have a ticket of ownership plus some skill-based metric that requires you to prove your value or your ability? TSG, maybe we'll come over and start with you from a gaming perspective.
Yeah, no, it was pretty funny. That story, that origin story is a wild one, but a fitting one for anything Yuga. And I a little bit of a sidetrack. I don't know if you guys remember when the Goblin thing was happening, Goblin Town. And everyone was speculating that it was Yuga as well. So just that hype alone kind of... So Yuga definitely owns or has this certain caliber in the space, right? This respect.
A plus for lore.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the thing even with Goblin. They're like, yo, the lore of this, like, man, it can only be Yuga. So they've definitely kind of branded themselves in that way, which I think is genius. In regards to the actual mini game and like the ticket idea, I think that's amazing. And I think it is a different conversation than just a Web3 game. It's more about creating and giving utility for NFT projects and profile picture projects, things like that, like another kind of thing. Because if you're building out a game, I mean, if you could use mini games for sure, that is a thing that can be done. I mean, if you look at most web studios, most mini games tend to build out into a fully fledged game if it is successful, right? If you look at Illuvium Zero, that's a pretty simple one. It started off as a mini game. Now it's like the core central thing to everything in the universe. So I think it's an incredible idea, honestly. The cool thing with it is the game isn't overly complex and it's accessible to everyone. And I think that's going to be the key here. I don't think these mini games need to be overly like, I mean, you could technically do something like a Minesweeper where it is just like mine bendingly just like impossible to do as well, that could be a little bit of fun. So like I know my wife or everyone, there's a craze in China right now where it's like you have to match 3 tiles together. The whole internet over here is going wild that people can't get past stage 2. Like, and if you get past stage 2, it's like people record it, they screen record it to share. They're like, yo, I did it. They could go one of 2 ways with this: is make it very accessible, like a temple run, or overtly like difficult to give that feeling of the first person to achieve that. I think it's one of those. I don't think them actually doing a mini game that's a real game, a real captivating game is what I'll say. I don't think that's the play. But I think adding utility through the use of mini games is an incredible way to engage your audience, build that hype back up around the product, around your brand. Like what Mona said, man, A++ for Yuga for like 99% of the time making the right moves. And this in my mind was definitely one of them. Yeah, what's your take, Mona?
I mean, same with you, both you and Annie. I think they're creating an engaging experience. It really is engaging. It does increase the value of the in-game items through that NFT, obviously. In situations like this, I mean, like you said, Yuga Lab, they've done this before, and they're just really good at storytelling, and they're really good at using their characters to engage their audience. But in any other case, I think it just needs to be executed really well for it to be successful. Like when you talk about mini games and NFTs, you really have to take into consideration who the audience are. And also, I feel like not everybody can do that. It really is a case-by-case basis because execution is everything in a situation like that. So that's just my life.
I do think that it was executed really well. As you were saying that, I was just thinking about it. But in regards to like what Annie said and the objective truth of them giving out the passes to all of their holders and not like gating it behind a purchase or anything like that. I mean, yes, you have to purchase a Basie or is it Basie and Macy or just Basie?
Yeah, it was both.
Yeah. So like, yeah, you had to have that already. But again, it's not saying that you're already in the community, you need to buy something else. It's like, yo, let's just get everyone involved, get everyone a treat. And the idea of a like to be determined prize is always a fun one. They could completely meme it because it was given for free. They could completely meme it and it's a sewer thing. So it's the key to the universe. I don't know. It's a key to like I don't know if you guys have watched Rick and Morty, but like the best loo, like the best toilet in the universe where he just sits there, peace and quiet. And just like you could have like a meme kind of like that. That could very much be a thing. Or it could be an actual prize as well, right? Everything about this, from my point of view, is it was just a win. It was just a win by Yuga. I don't see any kind of missteps.
I think the concept is really interesting. I can absolutely see a lot of organizations using this type of an approach where you've got customers of non-gaming projects that you want to bring them in and say, all right, I want to get you more involved and just more connected to the brand. A mini game is a very simple way to do that. And again, you can make it as lucrative an opportunity if you demonstrate skill or passive as you prefer. I don't think it's I think there's different ways just based on what you're trying to solve for. I do think it's interesting that as Mona and I were talking before we started the cast, gaming has always been a marketable skill if you were good enough. And you can compete in esports, you can stream content if you're high quality, you can make guides and so on. And so for at least I would say 2, maybe almost 3 decades now, if you were good enough at gaming, you were able to make some money on it. Now, with this type of a model, if you're talented, someone will certainly hire you to run their sewer pass level for them and try and get a higher score. And so we see many examples of either revenue sharing or hiring some of the best players in the world that people have been able to find to try and get them the best score, because again, they're assuming the final value of this thing might be 10 ETH, 20 ETH, 50 ETH, who knows? And so it's worth it if, what's a few $1,000s to pay someone who's really good at a game like this. And then they also, because of the nature of this pass structure and the NFTs, that same person can actually play multiple passes and get multiple high scores for different people too.
Yeah.
So kind of interesting.
I was telling you earlier, I mean, I saw a couple of those on YouTube because I was like, how hard can this be? You're going down a sewer pipe. But I mean, it was tough. I was sitting there watching it for a little while. I was like, okay, I see. I got to get through so many obstacles. Okay. And then people were trying to like score 100,000 and they couldn't. So they went and literally paid a best player somewhere to get the scores. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I think the market is only going to get bigger and bigger for skilled gamers. Like you see it already, even in like today's market with, again, I always go back to Smash Bros because that's what I know. But like you have coaches for Smash Bros. And it's like people just want to get better at the game without there even being like an economic incentive. And obviously, yes, you can say they want to get better so they can win tournaments. But most of the people paying for the coaching are not going to get to that top tier level where they are going to win the money. A lot of people just want to be better in their friend group or even in their local tournament where, all right, maybe there's $50 incentive. It's not life changing, but the hundreds of dollars that they're spending for the training, they think is more valuable than the 50 that they get back. And I think as economic incentivization is more and more of a thing in gaming, especially with ownership and things like that we discussed last week, I can only see it becoming more and more valuable in the marketplace.
Definitely.
I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's going to be interesting to see. But I think it makes sense that if a skill is more in demand, it deserves to be more valued like that.
So here's an additional consideration for you. So this also opens up a whole, other world of risk and challenges too, which is it was, I think, about 10 days after the game launched that it was shown on Twitter that someone had been able to successfully hack the game and basically become invulnerable and go through any of the obstacles without taking damage. So it is, the individual reported that they did not get a high score intentionally. They didn't sort of build the bot out that they'd been able to find the exploit with so that it could actually compete, supposedly. But they reported it to Yuga through sort of back channels, and whoever from the Yuga team or their contractors, I guess, that built the game out was in the process of fixing it and had a patch that they had. But again, it also opens up this other kind of darker side of gaming, which is you go back to cheat codes, all the way back in the day, or today where individuals are hacking networks, even where there's wealth and there's value that's being created. People have an incentive to try and get to it through any means possible. And so, I don't think that that's going to be the majority of people, but, certainly that's there. And so we can do maybe a later discussion in an upcoming episode on botting and on, risk. But yeah, I think this is kind of is an interesting point that people are going to find unique and creative ways to try and game the system as best they can.
Always. It's inevitable. Always. And actually, when I was watching the videos on YouTube, a couple of people speculated that was going to happen. So here you are, of course.
Yeah. So we're really excited to be joined today by a special guest. As everyone in our audience knows, ETH Lizards is sponsoring Gaming on the Block for this year. And so we're going to be joined today by not just any lizard, but the head of ETH Lizards. So K-Mao is the CEO of ETH Lizards. He's going to be joining us for a couple minutes here on the cast. And we're really pleased to welcome him to the space. We had a chance to meet and talk with him for a bit over a number of months now, and really has a lot of knowledge about Web3, and really excited to have him in the ETH Lizards ecosystem. So K-Mao, welcome to Gaming on the Block.
Oh, thank you for your warm welcome, Annie. Yeah, I watched the first episode that I think it was published 2 days before this was recorded. It was really interesting hearing all your discussions and everything, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, so K-Mao, we want to learn a little bit more about you too, and have you share with our audience. So I know you've been in crypto for a while. How did you find Web3?
I guess it really depends on what you classify Web3 as crypto and what the two differences. I think I've been in crypto since 2016, but I think when Web3 really started to blow off, and I pivoted to Web3 was around the 2020 era, where I think crypto gaming became really popular as well. And that was sort of the whole Web3 era as well. So yeah, 2020, I think that was when Illuvium first started coming out. A lot of narratives such as Axie came out as well. I think that's when Web3 truly became something feasible. But yeah, just Web3 does just seem like a rebranded version of crypto, which is has been around for a pretty long time.
I want to know. I just became a lizard, by the way, just so everybody knows. I'm actually in the Discord. I'm officially in the Discord channel, so I want to hear from the horse's mouth, from the lizard's mouth himself. How did this project started? Can you tell us that?
Oh well, it's a really interesting story. Basically, Kieran's Illuvium had like a little alpha channel where there were a bunch of memes and everything, and art was shared. And through that, like I guess like meme culture, people just ended up like building up this whole like project and like minted a bunch of like goofy like Genesis lizards. And then from there on out, people were like, oh, let's do this more seriously. And they took it more seriously. They minted out like a 5,000 collection. It really just blossomed from like the whole like degen side of Illuvium, which all like started because Kieran had that like one really like degen, like I think it was just like a degen like trading channel that like
Yeah, it's a DJ
he
channel.
like used to post stuff. Yeah, Illuvium. After like it got minted out, Kieran pushed forward the idea of like turning into a GameFi investment DAO, since the space was pretty interesting at the time. And then eventually over time it's just pivoted. Me and James and Kakashi or Lou came in a couple of months after, and we want to now like I guess like push forward the vision of things and like just experiment with what we can like call a DAO and just experiment with the boundaries of like crypto gaming in general. Honestly, I think the whole space is like just changed so much in the last couple of months. We've seen like huge narratives like like play to earn.
Oftentimes talk about the what, like what are we building? Very seldom do we talk about the why. Why are we building what we're building? So I want to ask you your why. Why are you building this project? What's your vision for this project?
Yeah, I think that's very valid. Like especially in a space like crypto where money is very would you say transient? Yeah, it's very transient. I think there's a lot of people that come in for the money and like come out very quickly. I think it's very important to actually focus on that like wide narrative and like find like a really like an important passion in life in general. Yeah. So I guess coming down to why is like a lot of like there's a lot of personal as well as like infrastructural like problems that like have sprouted from it, right? Ever since I was like 12, like in like primary school, I was a huge gamer. I found crypto literally through like playing video games. I remember trading a bunch of CS:GO skins back in the day. I couldn't find a way to cash out except like through that sort of stuff. So I ended up getting into that stuff like through all of that. And then so I've always just been a huge gamer. So Ether just seems like a perfect fit in like the perfect environment, the perfect market for me. It's a clash of what I like most in finance, which is crypto and decentralization, as well as one of my like most important passions, which is gaming. I just don't see gaming having sort of like very core infrastructural items, and I think a lot of the things we want to actually build in Ether relate to core infrastructural items in crypto gaming. So one of the products that's like in like development right now, right, which is sort of like I guess it's sort of like a decentralized content platform for like learning and like security and all of like that sort of stuff. It's just like if you look at like wider crypto in general, right, and especially DeFi projects, there's a lot of like projects and platforms that have come just to like sort of help cement that sort of like stance in the market and like cement the sector as a legitimate sector of like the whole like space in general. However, when you look at crypto gaming, right, just due to like the infancy of the space, there's just not a lot of like key infrastructural items. And as ethers, I feel like it's our responsibility to, build out these items, bring back revenue, and bring back all these things to our holders as well. And as well as this, like, I feel like the investing part doesn't really need to be elaborated on. A lot of games are predatory. A lot of games have shit tokenomics. A lot of games don't know what we're doing. I think we'd like to think we know what we're doing when it comes to gaming, considering, Kieran's one of our advisors and, he shits on every game he just hates. Yeah. I like to think that we know what we're doing. And, as like a GameFi DAO, right? We wanna push forward the next games we see coming big through our investing staff, helping them out through our community, our advisory, and obviously profiting a bit and returning that value back to our holders.
When you look at the gaming sector and you look at gamification, do you see us going beyond gamification within gaming and just entering into other areas of just different businesses using gamification in their sector as well? Where do you see gamification going from here?
Well, I'm a Chinese person, so I have a very strong Chinese background, and so just wanted to clarify. I know TSG loves China.
Yeah.
I think I heard.
I was just thinking the
some
same thing,
very,
man. I was just thinking the same thing.
yeah,
It's like I know
yeah,
what you're
some
gonna
very
get.
interesting. I'm pretty tapped into like how China deals with stuff. All my parents are Chinese, whatever. Through like what we've like seen in like China's markets, right? It's very interesting how things are happening there. Like, a lot of things are like secretly becoming gamified. Like, I can't really think of any examples to give in like the Western world, but I think like some really good examples, right? Like, so like, like McDonald's, KFC, and all those like apps that they have, like the Shake the Wins, those whatever like gaming apps. Those like that's just like one really like small example. But in China, it's taken to such a large extent where like shopping is like gamified. You can win coupons and stuff. Where like social media is even gamified. Like you just see like sort of every aspect of life gamified, and it's kind of like it's almost dystopian in a way because you sort of like you don't expect this sort of thing to be happening in like every part of like every part of society, and especially with how strict China is in terms of gaming. Like if you didn't know, if you're like under 18, you can't play more. Like you're just not allowed to play video games a lot. Like if you're on weekdays, and there's like a limit on how many video games you can play. It's like pretty like it's actually pretty like well enforced in China. Like companies are still like pushing forward and like finding like little ways to like add these addicting little games inside of like shopping apps, for example. So I definitely think like in the future, I think we're moving possibly a bit too fast now, and I think we'll end up seeing everything gamified, right? There'll end up being like pushback for legislation because things will end up being too addictive, and then we'll start seeing like certain things being more like nuanced. For example, I do think there are some aspects of like society that shouldn't be like gamified because there are like obviously negatives that come with it, right? And I think that eventually we'll see legislations that come and counteract those things, which will help us like find the perfect balance of adding a bit of fun to like everyday activities, going to a point where it's like you're literally like addicted to like shopping because there's just too many fun games.
If I can give a little bit of pushback on that, Cape, I actually disagreed that when it's going to be like moderated. I think we're going to go, even in the West, it's going to go full blown China. Everything is going to be gamified, and it's going to be up to the individual to actually have the discipline to say, yo, I'm not participating in this. I just think that the corporate greed and the addiction side of things is just going to happen. It's going to take over. The people that participate will fall into that. And those of us that are like, yo, we don't want to participate, or we understand and see it for what it is, and kind of put a limit and restriction on ourselves. I don't think it's going to be the corporations that put those restrictions. I think it's going to be us on an individual basis.
The gamification is kind of ever present, and a lot of times we don't even realize it. I remember it was about a decade ago, I was talking to someone and said, social media is basically gamifying relationships, right? So all of a sudden, the number of likes that you get, the number of friends that you have, I know all three of you are probably not quite as old as I am and don't remember when Facebook came out and you were back in college. But like that was it. Like, how many friends did you have? Okay, maybe Mona remembers.
I was in high school.
Yeah, okay.
Oh my gosh! Yes, we're the oldest ones. All right, go ahead.
I remember like poking people in like year 7.
Yeah. Oh my God! If you didn't get poked back, it was a thing.
That was a thing, bro. I remember that. Yeah, I'm not that.
That's exactly, I think, the concept of the world that we're going to. And not only are we going to gamify everything, but it's all going to be recorded on chain. So imagine having a fully gamified history visible on chain in perpetuity, right?
So you're saying that the people that didn't poke me back is going to be shown on chain? That disgrace and embarrassment is going to be public for everyone to see.
It will live forever in infamy on your public record, TSG.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Kamau, I think it's really great to have a chance to talk with you about ETH Lizards, and as a holder since really the early days before we were even a GameFi DAO. In general, the project has evolved a lot. Where would you say your long-term vision is for the project? In let's say long-term is probably longer, but let's say 2-3 years out, what would you like to be true about ETH Lizards?
I think just the first like overall goal is just to be sort of like that beacon of like I want like a lot of the core. I want us to be there for a lot of the core games that are built out. I want us to be there for a lot of like the content that's pushed out in Swarm or crypto gaming. I want us to be there for a lot of the platforms that lead to becoming. I just want to be like lead in the space. Honestly, I want us to be able to experiment with new ideas, new concepts, and like be first to invest in these new concepts through like our DAO and everything. I also want to look at like how esports is going to be run in like crypto gaming. Like I think esports is a huge deal, and I remember watching like I think it was GOG like land like I think 14 collaborations with like
the big
with,
esports
T1,
teams.
yeah, all the huge esports teams, and I was like, wow, we're really taking a step forward into this. And I do think forward in crypto gaming in 3 or 4 years, I think esports is gonna be a huge part of it, right? Isn't Alluvium esports actually becoming a huge thing already? And the game isn't even launched. I literally see teams being popped up on Alluvium already. I think esports is gonna be a huge part of it, and I want us to be there when that wave hits. And I want us to be the first to invest in these companies that open and work with esports, and I want us to be, even in the future, if this is the esports team. That's obviously just
Very good. So I think that's a fantastic vision, and I hope that all of our audience is going to stick with us. If you are not familiar with ETH Lizards as a project, you can do so by checking the link in the description. This video is going to be airing on the ETH Lizards YouTube channel, and you can also catch us on Twitter as well. So we look forward to seeing you all join us, whether it's in some AMAs with some of our partner projects or in any of those media channels. So Kema, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to having you on in a future episode again.
Nice meeting you.
And thank you for the.
See you soon. See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, K-Mal. Mona with the reporting questions. Let's go.
Yeah, I like to think that I'm good at doing interviews, but with a professional journalist on, 100%.
Thank you. No, he seems really cool. He seems young too.
I think he is.
Yeah.
Right? Yo, K-Mal, how old are you? If you can share. God damn.
What? I knew it.
TSG, you old man.
19. Yo, yeah, I feel fucking 19. Well, that means my man was born after 2000.
Dude,
I knew how old he was before you asked, so I wanted you to tell TSG just so that he recognizes his age.
If I had his level of knowledge at 19, you know what I would be right now? I would be a billionaire.
Madness, man. Moving on to our final topic, we're going to be discussing when do we need tokens? And there's been a lot of news recently, especially in Australia with one of the big banks, NAB, if I'm not mistaken, launching a CBDC, a stable coin. I want to ask Annie, because this is probably where you're a bit more clued up on than I am, but what are the pros and cons of a DeFi project launching a token? And then we can shift the conversation to CBDCs and things like that.
Yeah, so I think when people consider what is a Web3 project, they think immediately of a token, right? This is sort of that element that runs throughout every single project in DeFi. Most Web3 gaming projects have a token-based system or NFTs. And I think a lot of the original ones really launched tokens, and that's kind of what made them famous. So from a pro standpoint, there's several reasons why you want to have tokens, and there's also some pretty big risks. So the pros are, in general, you can try and get a cleaner alignment with stakeholders, meaning your investors, your customers, your product users, if they have a store of value that's linked to your project. And so it's the same reason that, if you're a business, you want to sell shares of stock or equity to individuals because they're then aligned with you in terms of both wanting to add value to the project. So I think this makes sense. And it's interesting because when you think about a stock, it's effectively just a form of a currency, right? So the value can go up and down when you compare it against the dollar or the euro or the renminbi or whatever. In general, it's still just kind of issuing a new store of value. It's the same way with tokens, but it's even quicker to do so. You can launch a token within a matter of hours if you want for an individual project. So I think that's one of the really key goals that projects want, is to have that alignment and incentive between investors and users. It's also, in my opinion, a pretty scalable, efficient, and secure structure. All of those things are really valuable in order to ensure that we talked about botting and cheating effectively in gamification of projects with the Yuga Labs Sewer Pass. In the same way, you want to ensure that if you're issuing value to someone, that it can't be easily replicated or stolen. So tokens give that, I think, to a lot of projects that want to launch them. The problem with launching tokens, especially in DeFi or Web3 gaming projects, is they're usually launched before the project is fully live or as it's live. And you're trying to get valuations on, in many cases, very early stage or even not even launched projects. This is a big challenge. It's a challenge in Web2 in the financial industry as well. What is the right valuation for a startup that's still 2 years out from launching their project, right? I don't really know. I mean, you can come up with an adjusted value for it. There's a lot of different ways you can approach that. But essentially, the market is doing that for you with a token 24/7. And so there's a lot of volatility that can get added to a project when you launch a token before you have any kind of revenue stream coming in. And I think this is a big risk that in turn then produces highly speculative markets. And I think many of the criticisms that we see about Web3 in general stem from exactly that you're not trying to value projects before they're out. When you talk about like, Web2, early internet startups, they didn't have this problem, right? You weren't trying to value pets.com before their IPO, right? You still had problems afterwards with the valuation, but that was the same, kind of problem in under a microscope where they were then a publicly traded company. Now you don't even have that. You just have a white paper and a Discord server where people are promising this is what we're building, trust us. And until you actually get content or a prototype or an alpha version out, it's really difficult. So those are, in my opinion, a couple of key pros and cons. Mona, coming over to you, as you talk with people both in the industry and outside, what do you think is the general perception of tokens and DeFi projects that are launching those?
I mean, I think, you said, Annie, I can never follow you and do a better job. I'm sorry. I mean, you covered it all. You said it really well. But I mean, I'll keep it clean in general. I mean, everyone, you got to have these tokens to first and foremost raise funds, right? That's the main reason everybody's using it for. And also you launch a token to provide that liquidity for the holders that you already talked about as well. But they also can be used for collateral for holders to borrow against their holdings. They can be used as a form of governance for decision making, like we talk about in DAOs. And you mentioned the cons too. They're speculative, they're volatile, and they may not have utility or value. Again, you mentioned that we see a lot of cases where projects launch a token before they even have a product, right? And then it turns out to be a whole scam. And not to mention the regulations, and we don't even know what that looks like yet. So all of these tokens in these projects face regulations that are about to come as well. So it's really, between everything you said, it's that across the board, and we're still going to see that for a little ways to come until we establish some of these foundations, secure foundations and reliable foundations. And I think we're still a little ways away from that.
Do want to move this across to the CBDC discussion, because again, like tokens, CBDCs, they're kind of linked. And so Australia just recently announced, or NAB, so the National Australian Bank, which is one of the five biggest banks in Australia, just recently announced that it's now the second bank in Australia to launch a stablecoin. And stablecoins and CBDCs are very, very linked. So with that, it's one of those things where, again, it's a pros and cons thing, right? Because there are a lot of benefits to having things on the blockchain rather than doing it the traditional way. For example, if I needed to send funds to you, Annie, or you, Mona, where we live in completely different parts of the world, doing it via the actual bank, via the actual system, the TradFi system, that I would have to wait till Monday, and maybe it might take 3 days to get to you, and it's just a hassle. It costs a lot, and even if it's over a certain amount, you might have to break it up into two. Like, it's just like a hassle from start to finish, honestly. Whereas the pro with having a stable coin or having something on the blockchain, whether it is a CBDC or not, is that ease of use. Is the fact that I can send you something, and I'm sure we all do send. I mean, I won't say that publicly. We could potentially be sending funds all around the world with just like a second, right? It doesn't take too much. It doesn't matter what day it is. It could be on a Sunday. It could be on Christmas itself. Like, you're going to get the funds straight away. So there are a lot of benefits to actually moving value through stablecoins and CBDCs. The negative, then, I don't want to say it's like conspiracy type stuff, but it's like it gives a lot of control. And I think giving someone else control of your finances is incredibly dangerous. They could block things out. They could say, yo, you're again, it's just like, and we see it in China. And I'll be honest, the things that we see on the Western news isn't actually, it's not that bad over here. Even what came out was saying about the them restricting children gaming. That's like, if they have a console, if they have a PlayStation or a Switch, there's no restriction for that. Like the kids can play as much as they want. It's just based on the parents at that point. Certain companies may do that. You can see that they do things that if you misbehave in a certain way, you get worse interest rates for your mortgage, things like that. You aren't able to access certain benefits that everyone else is. And you can see that playing out the same way with CBDCs. If that is tracked, they can say that you spent this much on a certain product. We don't want that to be the case. So that way we're going to lock you out or limit the amount that you can spend on a certain thing, which I think that's where the danger comes. And it's like, do the pros really outweigh the potential cons? And that's the conversation that I have to have with myself. And I'm keen to get your takes on it as well. I don't think so. I don't think that's, I think a completely decentralized currency is way more like efficient than a CBDC. And the thing is, and we've had this conversation, and again, Annie, me and you have had this conversation a lot more in our previous podcast last year as well, was the general consumer seems to lean towards convenience. And I have a very strong belief that CBDCs for the general public is going to be way more convenient than getting into a decentralized currency. And
well, that's what I was just going to ask you. Yeah. TSG, don't you think that maybe that would be the first step to then decentralization or self-custody? If you were to get people's feet wet, because I know in the case of AUD and stablecoin in Australia, they're using it for two reasons. One is for cross-border transactions, and then carbon credit trading, right?
Yeah.
So, but the purpose of a CBDC in general is to have a digital version of the country's fiat currency, right? So, if we're going to go toward decentralization, don't you feel like that's like the first step?
The thing is, I agree with you. It is the first step, but the example that I always use is like, if you look at gaming, and I think this is a great transition to the next thing as well, but if you look at gaming, for a Switch, for a Game Boy, for a PlayStation, for even an Android phone, the potential of these products, of the hardware, is incredible. All you have to do is bypass the limitations of it, and actually, because the limitations will take that as centralization on your, or even an iPhone. Like, you are limited with the amount of things that you can do on your iPhone. The way to break that and go into the decentralized way is to jailbreak it. So what percentage of iPhone users jailbreak it? And that's the thing. It's like, all right, so it's the same. So yeah, we're going to onboard a lot of people into the technology, but how many of them are actually going to take that extra step? Because that is, it's work to take that extra step. And I do think it is a benefit. I do think that overall it is a benefit to introduce a lot more people to the technology. But I think a lot of people are overestimating the conversion rate, that we're going to be like, oh, we're bringing people in. Now they're all going to come over here. They're not. Look at people that use Facebook, people that use YouTube. What is more convenient to them? Again, goes back to that convenience argument. What is more convenient to them? They're going to stick with. What's more convenient for them to just be quiet, accept the CBDC and say, this is the way it is now, or for them to take some time out after working a 9 to 5, an hour commute back, like to and from work. They're fucking tired. They've got kids at home. Then they need to learn about how to get onto the decentralization. Like it's a lot of work. Like, that's not convenient at all. Again, I do think there are benefits, but I just think that we're overestimating the conversion rate.
Annie, what do you think about? Do you think this is a stepping stone, or do you think we need to step right through go through decentralization and introduce that?
So I think from a government standpoint, CBDCs they're the end goal, because I agree with TSG. A token gives you control, and I didn't really specify that when we talked about the pros and cons. But when you release a token, certainly if you're the developer, I think part of the problem we have as holders of tokens, we think of a token as a coin, as if it's just like a digital quarter or a digital dollar bill or whatever. That's not what a token is. A token is a piece of code. It's software that can execute whatever a programmer tells it to do, right? And so if you instead of in your mind change your viewpoint of a CBDC and say, okay, it's not a digital stack of dollar bills or quarters, instead it's a stack of programs that people are giving to me that says, okay, here's your currency, but recognizing that someone is a developer on the other end of the table, and they can tell your currency exactly what to do. All of a sudden, it starts to feel a lot less like currency for the end user. I think honestly, the idea and the use of the word token causes some of the issue here, because that's not fundamentally what it is. when we look at the technology. And so, exactly to the point, the central banks are going to want to leverage CBDCs because, well, not central banks, but governments, so that they can basically circumvent challenges of central banks being inefficient and not having full control over the economy. If at the push of a button, you could say, we're devaluing the currency by 20%, you can't do that today, right? The Federal Reserve in the US and the equivalent central banks across the rest of the world, they don't have a magic switch. As much as we like to think that they can really control the economy, things aren't that simple for them. But if you could program the money to all of a sudden be worth whatever percent less, or the totally dystopian view that I think isn't really dystopian, regardless of what country you live in, that if the government that's in control of your country decides some segment of the population they want to negatively impact, they can say your money is now worth 15% less. Whatever you've spent your entire life working for and saving, all the things that you've gotten, now all of a sudden that goes out the window because somebody decided to push the button. All of a sudden it starts to look a lot less good. And regardless of where you stand, I think on kind of a political spectrum, what I always encourage people is think about what happens when the government is controlled by the party or the group that you don't favor right now. And that's what you should be steering towards from a political standpoint, is not, well, I think it would be great if my favorite group or politician or whatever controlled monetary supply. Think about what if the other person did that you didn't want. And if you're okay with that, then good, you should push for CBDCs. If you're not okay with that, then this is not really a direction that I think a lot of consumers and a lot of the general public would want if they really understood what it entailed.
Right. Good points. Very good points.
So I think, we'll talk, and this is a really good segue for one of our upcoming episodes to talk about tokens in gaming. But I think we want to have a discussion with our audience, think about like why tokens exist in the first place, what they give to you, because from a gaming standpoint, you're going to be able to leverage some of those same concepts to figure out when would you want to establish a token and what would that give you. With that, I think, PSG, why don't we go ahead and wrap it up for today, and we can end the episode. So
amazing.
Any final thoughts?
I feel like we ended that on a pretty dark and serious tone. Let's hope that's not a common occurrence on the show. But always a pleasure, Mona, a pleasure, Annie. A massive shout out to K-Mal for coming on today, and the ETH Lizards, of course, for sponsoring. Let us know in the comments down below. I think we had a really interesting conversation, and I'd love to have you guys share your thoughts with us in the comments. Pro CBDC, against it. Why? Share your thoughts. I really want to dive in a little bit deeper into this topic. I think it's a big one. But anyway, I appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you guys later. Peace.